In the small town of Willow Creek, where secrets lay buried beneath the surface and the scent of pine mingled with the crisp autumn air, a young boy named Ethan Carter was preparing to enter his senior year of high school. The summer had passed in a blur, but one event stood out vividly in his mind: the day he first set eyes on Ms. Lila Thornton, the new English teacher. Thornton was like a breath of fresh air in the stagnant hallways of Willow Creek High. With her fiery red hair and piercing green eyes, she lit up the dreary classrooms. Her passion for literature was evident. She spoke with such fervor about the words of Shakespeare and Hemingway that it ignited something deep within Ethan. He had always been an introverted boy, shy and reserved, but the moment she walked into the room, something shifted. Ethan found himself captivated. Each time Ms. Thornton spoke, he felt a connection that went beyond the ordinary teacher-student relationship. He hung on every word, drinking in her knowledge and charisma. His admiration quickly morphed into an infatuation that consumed him. As the months passed, Ethan's obsession grew. He began to excel in her class, not only to impress her but also to stay close to her. He would linger after class, helping her organize books or discussing literary themes in greater detail. Thornton, sensing his enthusiasm, encouraged his passion, but when Ethan dropped hints about his feelings, she dismissed them gently, reminding him that such affection was inappropriate. "I appreciate your admiration, Ethan," she would say, her voice warm but firm, "but remember that I am your teacher. It's important to keep our relationship professional." Despite her reassurances, Ethan's heart shattered each time she declined his advances. He spiraled into a dark place, where fantasies about their life together grew more vivid. He daydreamed about confessing his love, convinced she would reciprocate and they could escape the confines of their worlds together. One fateful evening, Ethan's resolve to win her heart turned into desperation. He decided to write her a letter, pouring out his soul onto the pages. He spoke of his dreams, his thoughts, and the profound impact she had on his life. But the thrill of anticipation soon turned sour as doubt crept in. What if she laughed at him? What if she felt repulsed? Unable to bear the thought of rejection, he tore the letter to shreds. That night, sleep eluded him. Images of Ms. Thornton haunted his mind, filled with both passion and despair. The following day, Ethan watched her interact with the other students, her laughter ringing like a siren's song. Each smile directed at someone else felt like a dagger piercing his heart. Fueled by jealousy, Ethan began to follow her, first casually, then obsessively. He learned her routines, her favorite coffee shop, and the park where she jogged every evening. It was sickening to him how easily he could lose himself in his fantasies, picturing their lives together while grappling with the bitter sting of reality. In the depths of his frenzy, something dark stirred within him. On a particularly cold afternoon, after another fruitless day of internal turmoil, he decided to confront her. He needed to know where he stood, needed her to understand the depth of his feelings. That night, with trembling hands and a heavy heart, he approached her after a late school meeting. "Ethan, is everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed as she noticed the intensity in his eyes. "I need to talk to you, about us, about how I feel." Her expression shifted to one of concern. "Ethan, we've talked about this. Please understand that you're a brilliant student, but I am your teacher. I cannot cross that line." Her words cut deeper than any knife, igniting a firestorm of anger and despair in his chest. In that volatile moment, Ethan saw red. The love that had once consumed him twisted into something menacing. He grabbed her arm, desperate for her to understand the weight of his emotions, and in a violent surge, pushed her away. The struggle sent her sprawling to the ground. In a moment he would never forget, he looked down at Ms. Thornton, her fear mirrored in her eyes. He knew he had crossed a line, but the madness bubbling inside him ignored all sense of right and wrong. In a blind rage, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small knife he had taken from the kitchen earlier that week. "Why won't you love me?" he shouted, the words tearing from his throat like a wild animal. "I did everything for you." Before he could process what he was doing, the blade glinted under the dim streetlight, and he plunged it into her side. Time seemed to freeze, and Ms. Thornton gasped, her green eyes widening in shock and horror. As he stood frozen, staring at the act he had committed in a fit of confused rage, reality crashed in on him like a tidal wave. He had taken her life, snuffed out the light that had captivated him so completely. Panic flooded his veins. What had he done? In those horrific moments, Ethan understood the weight of his actions. He could hear the distant sound of sirens wailing, but the world around him blurred. He staggered away, guilt and disbelief ricocheting in his mind. Uncertainty poured into him, mingling with his growing fear of the consequences. He wanted to scream, to cry, to rewind time, but all he could do was run. The search for Ms. Thornton began the next day when she failed to show up for school. The teachers noticed her absence, and when calls to her apartment went unanswered, an unease settled over the entire community. Days passed, and out of sheer desperation, Ethan felt compelled to attend the school. The guilt gnawed at him, his secret weighing heavily on his conscience. As he walked the familiar halls, whispers swirled around him, fellow students speaking of their beloved teacher, concerned parents, and police officers interviewing classmates. He watched, paralyzed, as friends expressed their sorrow. Yet inside, he felt nothing but a dark emptiness. The police investigation intensified, with every corner of Willow Creek searched for clues to locate the missing teacher. Ethan heard the hushed conversations, the shaking heads, and the tightening of lips around the town. Every time his classmates looked him in the eye, he wondered if they knew the truth. Did they see the darkness behind his forced smiles, the guilt trapped behind his curious gaze? It wasn't long before the police pieced together the timeline of Ms. Thornton's disappearance. Friends remembered Ethan hanging around her more than usual in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, and his mounting anxiety caught their attention. In a gut-wrenching twist, they found her body hidden in the woods, crumpled beneath an old oak tree. The town fell into deeper mourning. Ethan's heart raced as he sensed the noose tightening around him, yet he remained silent, constructing a facade that would keep him safe. Yet guilt can be a relentless specter. Ethan soon began to unravel. Nights were filled with her screams echoing in his ears, days distorted by paranoia. He saw her everywhere, her laughter wafting through the halls, her presence haunting him like a ghost. Ultimately, Ethan was unable to sustain the lie. The weight of his crime pressed too heavily upon him, manifesting in sleepless nights and paranoia. One fateful evening, consumed by madness, he stepped into the police station and confessed. "I'm guilty," he said, voice trembling as he met the officer's bewildered gazes. "I killed her." As they led him away in handcuffs, Ethan felt a shocking sense of relief. He was no longer running. He would pay for the darkness that had consumed him. In the end, his obsession-turned-tragic death had not only stolen Ms. Thornton's life but had left a scar on the town that would never heal. Willow Creek would never forget Ms. Lila Thornton, the teacher who had ignited dreams and passions, only to extinguish by the hands of a love that turned into something monstrous. Ethan Carter's story would become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the thin line between love and madness, and how easily one can slip into the shadows of obsession.